come crashing down and you feel like you're going to stay under that water forever. But somehow you come back up. You get to breathe in that air, even though you fill your lungs up so much. Next thing you know, you're back under the water again. Some of that stuff's been there for years. Like, there's a lot of issues that we think, oh, it's been 2 years, it's not bothering me anymore. It's bothering you. And then I get on here and I'm trying to be so real all the time. Oh, I'm in the realest way. This is in the realest way. But is it in the realest way? If everything in your life is fake. Welcome back to In the Realest Way Podcast by Marqes Smith, where we talk about so many topics in the realest way. On this podcast episode titled Life Changes, I'm going to talk about the many, many things in my life that have changed. Recently, I've been blessed. I've been grateful enough to have a person come into my life who genuinely cares about my well-being. Somebody who, despite everything I've gone through and I've been through, and me being so afraid to just reach out for somebody, they were there. And I've been so grateful. Past relationships, and I'm not just talking about romantic, but platonic relationships, all kinds of relationships. I've been very specific with who I allow to really see me. And over the years, I've become so drained and so tired, and I've developed really, really unhealthy tendencies when leaving people. I didn't want to leave people anymore. I didn't want to lose anybody, so I allowed them to treat me any kind of way. But I just wanted to express how not closing yourself off is so important. When we go through painful, situations and we come out really hurt or traumatized, we close ourselves off. We don't allow ourselves to feel these things anymore. But I know that's worse. That's the worst thing that you can do, is to close yourself off. Now, nobody's saying not to be careful, not to be cautious, but closing your heart is the worst thing that you could do. If anything, you need to open it up wider so that the people who are deserving of your energy, your time, and your space, they can see you. And when you allow them in, it's a constant feeling of fulfillment. You feel filled. I never, how you talk about things and you're like, well, I never experienced this before. But once you experienced it, oh, this is how it's supposed to be. In any example, oh, I've tried different types of foods, right? Of the same food. I tried different people cooking the food and it was different. Somehow it always tasted different. But when this one person cooked it, they cooked it just right. Oh, this is exactly how it's supposed to taste. The same thing with people. I didn't really experience a healthy relationship until I met them. Until I was in their space, in their time. Until I was able to be around somebody who was mutually in the same mindset as me, the same space as me. It's important that you don't allow yourself to be around people who they don't really care about what you care about. And they're not interested in the things that you're interested in doing in terms of like bettering yourself, right? You're trying to be healthy. You're trying to, become a better person. And they're doing the opposite of what you're doing. Y'all are pulling from each other. It is important that you understand that when life changes, you change with life. Don't be so willing to go the opposite direction. I could have stayed by myself when I came to this new state, when I came back to America from being in South Korea. I was going to do that. oh, I'm going to stay in my little bubble. But I allowed myself to open up once again, and I'm so glad that I did. Now, when I talk about these life changes, understand that everything is not always good. And there's always going to be people who are going to try. And I truly believe that some people, they were placed on this planet to be somewhat of a guider, somewhat of a barrier, or a lesson. They were put on this earth to be a lesson to somebody. Everybody doesn't have the same purpose as you. Now, your value does not change. I'm not saying we're better than them. I'm not saying they're better than me. But I'm saying that everybody's purpose is different. And I don't believe that everybody's supposed to just be, doing it like this. I think everybody's calling is different. But some people were placed in their life in general, and sometimes specifically in our lives, to be a lesson. To be like, okay, are you learning from this experience that you had months ago or a couple of days ago? Have you learned? Because it's not like, oh, you learned the lesson, like, oh, now I know how to do this and it's going to forever, stick with me. But it's a thing of, okay, another person came into your life and they're treating you this way, they're doing this, and you can feel it too. That feeling that you get that's like, oh, I feel kind of weird about this person, or I don't really know, I don't know how to feel about it, but it's kind of like, this weird feeling in your stomach. It's your gut. It's your instincts telling you that this person, they ain't for you. Run. And instead of me listening to that this time with this one person, I was like, oh, okay, somebody nice, get into it again, I guess. It was the opposite. I know for sure that this person was a lesson that I needed to learn, and I've learned it. I'm going to continue to learn it. Again, it's not a one-time thing, but I just find life so interesting. There was one situation, and I'm not going to talk too much about it, but I am a very, vocal person. As you can tell, I have a podcast and stuff like that, but I found myself in a situation where my intentions were pure, but everybody, everybody's intentions, and, everybody's going through their own thing. But I want the important thing about when we talk about life changes, everybody's not going to change with you. Everybody's not going to be willing to change just because you're changing. Some people are dealing with their own battles and they're going through their own struggles, and you can't expect them to just change. Now, do you want them to? Of course. I open my heart up. It's such a powerful thing to do, just to open yourself up to love. But when doing that, you're opening yourself up to pain and hurt. But I've learned to cope with it in a more healthy way. But also, I learned to not allow other people's actions and how they treat me to be the overall, reflection of who I am and what I see for myself. How you treat me has nothing to do with me and all to do with you. Even if what I said was truly disrespectful, it doesn't you know what I'm saying? Your actions are your actions and my actions are my actions. Nobody can control what you say and how you feel. Only you can. You can allow them to, but at the end of the day, you allowed them to. You gave them permission to. So when I was in the situation where I was talking to this one person and they took what I said disrespectfully, you have every right to do so. Listen, when somebody is in your life, or just not even in your life, they feel like what you're doing is disrespectful, they have the right to feel that way. You don't get to tell people how they can feel. You don't get to tell people how they can act, regardless of how they're acting. You don't get to tell people that. Now you can say, hey, I care about you, or hey, I feel like, as a human being that, I think that you should, reconsider. But you don't have control over somebody, and you don't get to tell them what to do. We don't have the power to do that. And once you realize that, it's going to be so much freeing. Like I'm not interested in going out of my way to the point to where I overexert myself, even just a little bit, for somebody who has zero interest in changing. They have no interest in changing at all. You didn't even tell, like, even if what I said, and this is how I know, you have to be willing to open your heart up and say how you feel, even if you feel hurt. Hey, that hurt me. But this person, instead of doing that, instead of hey, I don't like what you said, I don't know how you meant it, but I took it as being disrespectful. You don't have to explain yourself to the point to where it's like, well, this is why this is how I feel and all this kind of stuff. Hey, I don't like when you say that, or I don't like when you do that. You got but one time to tell me, and I'm going to stop. Even if we're not friends, even if we're not close, I respect you. And I've never intentionally, and now I say intentionally now, I've never intentionally went out and tried to hurt somebody. Like, oh, I'm trying to hurt you. Like, I am intentionally doing this to hurt you. Never. Now, me protecting my peace, me protecting my mind and my sanity, and if that means cutting you off or restricting you and it hurts you, that's secondary. I ain't even trying to do that, but I got no choice to, because I got to think about myself. Life changes. There was one point when I just tried to hold on to people. Oh, I need you. I need you to be in my life. I need you to support me. I need you to just be there, to be a pillar in my life, because I can't stand on my own. But every single season, that pillar broke and another pillar broke. And eventually, I was holding myself up. And through that struggle, through that tribulation and stress and feeling like I couldn't do anything else, I learned that I could hold myself up. And now I found somebody, and maybe our season won't last forever, but I found somebody who's willing to stand on that pillar with me. Good people. And when I say good people, good and bad is purely subjective. Granted, there are some things that a lot of people would agree is bad and stuff like that. But good friends, true friends, they don't come around often. You don't just wake up and go outside and just find, a friend who actually cares about you. I felt like I had those people before. I still had that weird feeling in my stomach, but I kept going, where any bit of success I got, or I did this, or I talked about that, and mid-conversation, I just felt so uneasy just because they didn't care about what I had to say, and I was just an accessory to them. Just something that they could just walk around with. Forgot to mention this, I guess, because so much has been going on since I created my last podcast episode. And unfortunately, me creating a batch load of podcast episodes, then coming home from Korea and making another podcast episode in my grandmother's house, I somewhat forgot how to set up my camera correctly and chop my head off. So I couldn't upload it that way. So the 50th podcast episode, the anniversary podcast episode, is a only audio podcast, which is okay. I mean, mistakes happen and lessons were learned. I need to stay on my P's and Q's, that's for sure. But now I'm sitting on the floor of my new apartment. There are moments when I feel so alone. Even when I know that there's people who are here for me. And some things we just can't do on our own, despite how much we've gone through. And I was having this conversation today with a really good friend of mine. We were talking about, and you know how, I know I'm all over the place, but remember a couple of podcast episodes, I think maybe 2 or 3, or maybe even, that's not one because that was the 50th, but I talked about the downfall of my relationships, and it was posted fairly recently, but the podcast episode was created a while ago. It was a bachelor podcast. And I've had a lot of relationships since then, platonic relationships, and now a romantic one. And I said I wouldn't, any kind, I wouldn't be a part of it. But look at me now. I opened my heart up, and I was blessed with somebody who I know it's genuine. I know it's real. They've shown up in my life. They've been there. Like, this is how it's supposed to feel. This is how it's supposed to feel. I forgot what. Just be all over the place. I just forgot what I was going to say after that. But the important lesson about this podcast episode is that life will constantly change. I mean, it's always moving. We're always moving. But to allow yourself to stay constant, stay in the same mindset, it's almost like you're placing yourself on a stake to suffer. Life has always been about changing. It's always been about learning. It's always been about growing. Oh my goodness. That going through these experiences, from leaving high school, going into the military, and meeting so many amazing people along the way, has been the hardest thing that I've had to deal with. And even the ones where the experience wasn't so, I guess, comforting or warming, we had our differences. I still look back. I think I look back a little too much, but I look back at the moments and the times and everything that I've been through, and I just feel so happy. Like, I get to live and experience these things. I get to go through life and see its changes. That's so crazy. You know how many people, they're not waking up tomorrow. They're not able to do a podcast, let alone open their eyes. They're gone. They're gone from this planet. So as we move forward, we have to be reminded of the people who are here before and who are still here now. I don't do this just for me. Granted, this is a very healing experience, but I don't do it just for me. There's somebody out here listening to this podcast. They're going through something that is difficult, yet they continue to show up for themselves every single day. Life is for real like an ocean. One moment that thing is calm, honey. I mean, so calm, like you can just, oh my goodness. And then there's some times when the waves come crashing down and you feel like you're going to stay under that water forever. But somehow you come back up. You get to breathe in that air, even though you fill your lungs up so much. Next thing you know, you're back under the water again. But one day, The waves aren't going to change. You are. And as much as life changes, we will continue to change too. And I don't want to hold this podcast up longer. I did want to state the fact that I am totally in a different place than I was before. And I love that for myself. I can see that. Nobody could ever tell me that I never changed. I'm like, look at the first podcast and look at this one. 51 podcast episodes. And before I end this, I just want to say thank you so much for everybody who's listened, who's watched, who's been on this journey with me. Oh, I'm so grateful. And everybody who's going to come along in the future. I plan on changing the world. So like I say at the end of every podcast episode, I give thanks to the utmost, to the highest power, God. I'm thankful for my friends and my family. I am truly, truly grateful. This is NTheRealestWay Podcast. Out.
Some people, I know you're not a hillbilly. I know you're not a hillbilly. I know you're not a hillbilly.